The blood-red horizon swallowed the last rays of sunlight as Hannah Gardner stood on the porch of what was no longer her home, clutching a crumpled letter that had changed everything. Montana Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman alone, but that's exactly what she had become in the span of a single day. "Mrs. Gardner, I'll need those keys." The bank manager, Mr. Perkins, held out his hand with a practiced expression of false sympathy. "The property now belongs to the bank." Hannah's fingers tightened around the brass key. The ranch had been her dream, not Edward's. She had been the one who planted every flower in the garden, who painted the shutters blue, who made this house a home while her husband gambled away their future. "May I at least collect my personal belongings?" Her voice remained steady even as her world collapsed. Perkins nodded curtly. "You have until sunset tomorrow, not a minute longer." Hannah watched him climb into his carriage, bell rising in her throat. Edward had left 3 weeks ago for a business opportunity in Billings. His real business, she now knew, had been poker tables and whiskey. The letter had arrived yesterday. Her husband had signed over their ranch to cover his debts before disappearing, presumably to California or some other distant territory where his reputation couldn't follow. She stepped back into the house, the home that was no longer hers, and looked around at the life she was about to lose. 15 years of marriage, and all she had to show for it was a trunk of clothing, her mother's silver hairbrush, and crushing betrayal. As night fell fully across the Montana sky, Hannah sat at the kitchen table and did something she hadn't allowed herself to do since receiving the letter. She wept. The dawn brought no comfort. Hannah had spent the night packing what little she could claim as truly hers. Her clothes, a few books, the hairbrush, a locket with her parents' pictures, and her sewing supplies. Everything else, the furniture, the dishes, the paintings, would stay with the house. Edward had lost it all. She was 33 years old, childless, and now homeless. The ranch had been isolated, nearly 20 miles from the town of Silverdale. Edward had preferred it that way. Fewer neighbors meant fewer people noticing when he'd return drunk or disappear for days. Hannah hitched her old mare, Penny, to the small cart and loaded her trunk. She had nowhere to go but Silverdale, where perhaps she could find work as a seamstress or housekeeper. The thought made her stomach churn. Not because the work was beneath her. Hannah had never been afraid of hard work, but because in a town the size of Silverdale, everyone would know her story by sundown. The widow who wasn't a widow. The woman whose husband had abandoned her. The object of pity. As she took one last look at the ranch, Hannah squared her shoulders. She would not be defined by Edward's betrayal. Somehow she would rebuild. The journey to Silverdale took nearly all day. The October air had a bite to it, and Hannah pulled her shawl tighter as she guided Penny down the main street. The town had grown since her last visit, nearly 2 months ago. New buildings stood half-constructed, evidence of the silver boom that had brought prosperity to this part of Montana. Hannah stopped in front of the Silverdale Hotel, a 2-story building that was the pride of the town. She couldn't afford to stay there long, but she needed a place for the night while she figured out her next steps. "Mrs. Gardner." The surprised voice belonged to Sophia Wilson, the wife of the general store owner. "What brings you to town, and with a trunk no less?" Hannah forced a smile. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson, I'm staying in town for a while." The woman's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Is Mr. Gardner with you?" "No." Hannah kept her answer simple. "If you'll excuse me, I need to secure a room." She could feel the woman's gaze on her back as she entered the hotel. By morning, everyone would know Hannah Gardner had arrived alone with all her worldly possessions in one trunk. The hotel clerk, a young man with spectacles too large for his face, looked up as she approached. "Good afternoon, madam. How may I help you?" "I need a room, the most affordable you have, of course. How long will you be staying?" Hannah hesitated. "I'm not certain, a few days at least." The clerk nodded, turning the registry toward her. "That'll be $1 per night, meals not included. We serve breakfast for an additional 25 cents and supper for 40. Hannah did the quick mental calculation. With the money she had managed to scrape together, the small amount Edward hadn't found and gambled away, she had less than $20 to her name. It would last 2 weeks at most. Just the room for now, she said, signing the registry with a slightly trembling hand. Room 4, top of the stairs on the right. He handed her a key. Do you have bags to bring up? Just one trunk in my cart outside, and I'll need to stable my horse. The stable's around back, 50 cents per night for the horse, 25 for storage of your cart. Another expense. Hannah nodded, trying not to show her panic. After settling Penny in the stable and bringing her trunk to the small, sparse room, Hannah sat on the edge of the bed. She needed work, and quickly, tomorrow, she would visit the dressmaker. Her sewing skills were excellent. Perhaps there would be work there. If not, she would check with the laundry, the restaurant, anywhere that might hire a woman with no references but plenty of determination. Hannah unpinned her hair, letting the chestnut waves fall around her shoulders. She was too tired to cry anymore. Instead, she made a silent promise to herself. She would never again depend on anyone else for her survival. Morning came too quickly. Hannah dressed in her best day dress, a simple navy blue with white piping that she had sewn herself, and pinned her hair in a practical bun. She needed to make a good impression. Silverdale was already bustling when she stepped out of the hotel. Mining towns never truly slept. Men worked in shifts, and the businesses catered to their schedules. She made her way to Madame Beaumont's dress shop, hoping her French-sounding name indicated a sophisticated clientele who might pay well. The bell above the door jingled as Hannah entered. The shop was empty of customers, with several half-finished dresses displayed on forms. "One moment," called a voice from the back room. A minute later, a woman in her 50s emerged, pins held between her lips and measuring tape around her neck. She removed the pins and smiled. "Good morning." "How may I help you?" "Good morning, Madame Beaumont. My name is Hannah Gardner. I was hoping to inquire about possible employment. I'm an experienced seamstress." The woman's smile faltered. Mrs. Gardner, Edward Gardner's wife, so the news had already spread. Hannah nodded stiffly. "I heard what happened. Terrible business that." Madame Beaumont, whose real name Hannah suspected was probably something far less exotic, looked her up and down. "You do good work. That dress fits you beautifully." "Thank you. I made it myself." "I can see that. The stitching is excellent." She sighed. "I wish I could help you, Mrs. Gardner, truly, but business has been slow lately. The miners have been sending more money home instead of spending it on dresses for their companions." Hannah understood the euphemism. Many of Madame Beaumont's clients were likely the women who worked in the saloons and brothels at the edge of town. "I understand. If your situation changes, I would be grateful for the opportunity. I'll keep you in mind." The woman hesitated. "Have you tried the Silver Palace Hotel? They're always looking for laundresses, and they pay better than most." Hannah hadn't considered the new hotel that had opened on the other side of town, catering to wealthier travelers and mine investors. "Thank you for the suggestion. I'll try there." The Silver Palace Hotel was indeed a palace compared to where Hannah was staying. Its lobby featured imported carpets and a chandelier that must have cost more than the entire ranch she had just lost. The manager, a thin man with a waxed mustache, looked skeptical when Hannah inquired about work. "We have very high standards here, Mrs. Gardner. Our clients expect perfection." "I assure you, sir, I understand the importance of quality work. I'm detail-oriented and hard-working." He studied her for a moment. "Very well. We do need help in the laundry. 6 days a week, sunrise to mid-afternoon, 50 cents a day." It was less than she'd hoped, but it would keep her from destitution. "When may I start?" "Tomorrow morning. Ask for Mrs. Holloway in the back. She runs the laundry." Hannah thanked him and left, relief washing over her. $3 a week would cover her room at the cheaper hotel and stable fees for Penny, with a small amount left over for food if she was careful. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. As she walked back to her hotel, Hannah noticed a commotion near the bank. A group of riders had just arrived, dust still settling around their horses. They were trail-worn but carried themselves with the confidence of men accustomed to hard living. "Cattle drives here early this year," commented a man standing next to her. Hannah watched as one of the riders, a tall man with broad shoulders, dismounted with fluid grace. Unlike his companions, who headed straight for the saloon, he tied his horse to the hitching post outside the bank. There was something striking about him, not just his height or the way he moved, but a kind of quiet authority. His hat was pulled low, shading his face, but she could see a strong jaw lined with stubble. He wore simple clothes, dusty from the trail, but his gun belt was well maintained. A cowboy, then. Probably the foreman or trail boss based on the deference the others showed him. Hannah continued on her way. Cowboys came and went through Silverdale, driving cattle north from Texas or east from Oregon. They brought business to the town, spent their pay, and moved on. They were as transient as the seasons. She had more immediate concerns. Tomorrow she would begin her new life as a laundress, scrubbing fine linens for people wealthy enough to stay in a place like the Silver Palace. It wasn't what she had envisioned for herself, but it was honest work. That night, as Hannah prepared for bed, she heard raucous laughter and music from the saloon down the street. The cowboys would be celebrating their arrival, drinking away the dust of the trail. She thought of Edward and wondered if he was in some similar establishment, gambling away whatever money he had managed to take with him when he fled. For the first time, anger eclipsed her sorrow. Edward had taken everything from her: their home, their future, her security. But he hadn't taken her will to survive. Hannah Gardner would rebuild her life one day at a time, starting tomorrow. Dawn came early, and with it, the realization of her new reality. Hannah dressed in her simplest clothes, knowing they would soon be soaked with water and soap. She ate a piece of bread she had purchased the previous day and headed to the Silver Palace. Mrs. Holloway proved to be a stern woman in her 60s with arms like steel from decades of washing. She showed Hannah the laundry room, a hot, steamy chamber at the back of the hotel filled with large copper tubs, washboards, and clotheslines. "The gentlemen's shirts need special care," Mrs. Holloway explained, "and the bed linens must be boiled before washing. No shortcuts." Hannah nodded. "I understand. We'll see. Most new girls don't last a week. It's hard on the hands." She gestured to her own, red and chapped despite their strength. By midday, Hannah understood why. The soap was harsh, the water either scalding or icy, and the endless scrubbing left her fingers raw. But she persisted, working alongside 3 other women who barely spoke, focused on their tasks. When she finally emerged into the afternoon sunlight, Hannah's back ached and her arms felt like lead. But she had earned her first day's wages, 50 cents that she clutched tightly as she made her way back to her hotel. She passed the general store and paused. She needed to be frugal, but she also needed to eat. Inside, she selected the cheapest items she could find: beans, a small piece of salt pork, some flour. "It would have to do, Mrs. Gardner." Mrs. Wilson's voice was honey-sweet with curiosity. "I heard you're staying in town for a while." Hannah forced a smile. "Yes, that's right." "And Mr. Gardner?" There was no point in hiding it. By now, everyone knew. "My husband has left, Mrs. Wilson. He gambled away our ranch and disappeared." The woman's eyes widened with a mixture of shock and barely concealed excitement at having her suspicions confirmed. "My word. How dreadful for you." "Yes, now, if you'll excuse me, I've had a long day." As Hannah paid for her meager purchases, she felt Mrs. Wilson's eyes on her back. The story would spread faster now that she had confirmed it. Hannah Gardner, abandoned wife, reduced to working as a laundress. She held her head high as she left the store. The next day followed the same pattern, and the next. Wake before dawn, work until her muscles screamed, return to her room, too exhausted to do more than eat a simple meal, and collapse into bed. Her hands grew raw despite the lanolin she applied each night. On her 4th day at the laundry, as Hannah was hanging sheets in the back courtyard of the hotel, she noticed the cowboy she had seen arriving in town. He was speaking with the hotel manager, his back to her, but she recognized the broad shoulders and the way he stood straight but relaxed, like a man comfortable in his own skin. The manager gestured toward the restaurant, and the 2 men walked in that direction. Hannah returned to her work, dismissing the brief distraction. That evening, as she walked back to her hotel, Hannah realized she needed to think beyond day-to-day survival. The laundry work would keep her from starving, but she couldn't live in the hotel indefinitely. She needed a plan. Perhaps she could save enough to rent a small room somewhere in town. Somewhere with a kitchen where she could cook properly. instead of relying on what she could prepare in her hotel room with just a small spirit lamp. Maybe eventually she could open a dressmaking business of her own if she could save enough for materials and a sewing machine. Lost in thought, Hannah didn't notice the group of men exiting the saloon until she was nearly upon them. 3 cowboys, clearly drunk, blocked the boardwalk. "Well, look what we have here," said one, his words slurring. "A pretty lady all alone." Hannah kept her eyes down and attempted to step around them. "Excuse me, gentlemen," one of them moved to block her path. "What's your hurry, darlin'? Night's just getting started. Please let me pass. I'm tired and wish to return to my hotel." The third man, taller than the others, leaned in close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "I heard about you. You're that woman whose husband ran off, probably looking for a real woman who knows how to keep a man happy." The cruel words stung, but Hannah maintained her composure. "I said let me pass, or what?" The first man reached for her arm. "Or you'll answer to me." The deep voice came from behind her. Hannah turned to see the cowboy from before, standing a few paces away. In the lamplight, she could finally see his face clearly, strong features, a straight nose, eyes the color of a storm cloud, and a mouth set in a hard line. He wasn't young, perhaps 40 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun. "This ain't your business, McCoy," said the taller drunk, though he took a step back. "I'm making it my business." The man McCoy didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone made the 3 cowboys exchange glances. "We were just having a friendly conversation," muttered the first man. "Didn't sound friendly to me." McCoy moved to stand beside Hannah. "The lady asked you to let her pass. I suggest you do so." For a tense moment, Hannah thought the men might argue further, but then the taller one spat on the ground and shrugged. "Come on, boys." Plenty of willing women at Rosie's place. They shuffled off, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Hannah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Mr. McCoy." "Ryder McCoy, madam." He tipped his hat. "And you're welcome, though I'm sorry you were bothered in the first place. Those men work for me, and they'll be hearing about their behavior tomorrow. You're the trail boss," he nodded, "bringing a herd up from Texas to the railroad at Helena." "I'm Hannah Gardner." She hesitated, wondering if he too had heard the gossip about her situation. If he had, he gave no indication. "May I escort you to your destination, Mrs. Gardner, to ensure you're not troubled again?" "That's very kind. I'm staying at the Silverdale Hotel." They began walking, Ryder adjusting his longer stride to match hers. "You're new to town," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Is it that obvious?" "Silverdale's not so big that a new face goes unnoticed, especially—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "Especially when attached to a scandal," Hannah supplied wryly. Ryder looked uncomfortable. "I don't listen to gossip, Mrs. Gardner. It's not gossip if it's true. My husband did abandon me after gambling away our ranch." She was surprised at how steadily she could say the words now, as if talking about someone else's misfortune. "I'm sorry to hear that." They walked in silence for a moment. "What brings you to Silverdale, if you don't mind my asking?" Hannah said, more to fill the silence than out of real curiosity. "Business, mostly. Selling the herd, settling accounts, then back to Texas before winter sets in." They reached the hotel, and Hannah turned to face him. "Thank you again for your assistance, Mr. McCoy. Ryder, please." He tipped his hat again. "Good night, Mrs. Gardner." "Hannah," she corrected, surprising herself. He smiled then, transforming his serious face. "Good night, Hannah." She watched him walk away, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. Hannah wasn't fool enough to read anything into the encounter. He was simply a decent man who had intervened when she needed help. In a week or two, he would be gone, driving his cattle to the railroad, and then returning to Texas. Hannah's life would continue here, washing linens and saving pennies, trying to rebuild from nothing. The next morning, Mrs. Holloway assigned Hannah to the guest rooms, changing linens and collecting laundry. It was a promotion of sorts, less physically demanding than the washing, though it meant interacting with hotel guests. Some of these men aren't used to seeing women who aren't professional, Mrs. Holloway warned. "You keep your eyes down and your manner respectful. Any trouble, you come find me." Hannah nodded. The warning was unnecessary. She had no intention of engaging with the hotel guests beyond what her job required. As she moved from room to room with her cart of fresh linens, Hannah found herself wondering about the lives of the people who stayed in such luxury. Business investors, mostly men with money to spend on the silver mines that dotted the mountains around Silverdale. On the second floor, as she knocked on room 204, a familiar voice answered. "Come in." Hannah opened the door to find Ryder McCoy sitting at a small writing desk, papers spread before him. Oh, she hadn't expected to see him again so soon, and certainly not while she was changing linens. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. McCoy. I can come back later." He stood immediately. "No need, Mrs. Gardner, Hannah." He looked as surprised as she felt. "I didn't realize you worked here." "At the Silver Palace, yes, though I'm usually in the laundry." She gestured to the cart. "I'm filling in with the rooms today." Ryder began gathering his papers. "Please, don't let me interrupt your work. I need to meet with the bank manager anyway." Hannah moved to the bed, feeling oddly self-conscious as she began stripping the sheets. It was one thing to do this work in empty rooms. It was quite another to have someone watch, especially someone who had seen her in different circumstances. "The men who bothered you last night," Ryder said suddenly, "they've been disciplined. It won't happen again." Hannah looked up. "Thank you, though you didn't need to do that on my account." "I didn't do it just for you. Men who can't respect women aren't men I want working for me." She nodded, appreciating his straightforward manner. Most men would have made a grand show of their chivalry. "How long will you be in Silverdale?" she asked, smoothing the fresh sheet over the mattress. "Another week, maybe 2, depends on the railroad schedule and final negotiations with the buyers." Hannah moved to the washstand, replacing the towels, and then back to Texas. "That's the plan." There was something in his tone that made her look at him. "You don't sound certain." Ryder shrugged, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Plans change sometimes." "They certainly do," Hannah agreed, thinking of how drastically her own life had changed in just a matter of weeks. She finished her tasks quickly, aware of his presence even as he pretended to focus on his papers again. There was something about Ryder McCoy that unsettled her, not in an unpleasant way, but in a manner that made her too conscious of herself, of him, of the space between them. "All finished," she announced, collecting the dirty linens. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. McCoy?" "Ryder," he corrected again. "And no, thank you." Hannah nodded and wheeled her cart toward the door. "Actually," he said, stopping her, "there is one thing. Would you join me for dinner this evening, at the restaurant downstairs?" The invitation caught her completely off guard. "Dinner with you?" "Yes." He seemed suddenly less sure of himself. "Unless you have other plans." "No, Hannah hesitated. She hadn't dined with a man other than Edward in 15 years. Was this proper? What would people say? But then, what did it matter what they said? They were already talking about her. "Yes, I would like that. 7 o'clock, I'll meet you in the lobby. I'll be there." Hannah left quickly, her heart beating a little faster than normal. It wasn't until she was halfway down the hall that she realized the implications. She had agreed to dine with a man she barely knew, a man who would be leaving soon. What was she thinking? And yet, she didn't regret accepting. After weeks of solitude and hard work, the prospect of a pleasant meal and conversation was appealing. It didn't have to mean anything more than that. At 5 o'clock, Hannah returned to her own hotel to prepare. She washed with the small amount of water provided by the hotel, then changed into the only other dress she had brought, a forest green cotton with a modest neckline and slightly outdated bustle. It had been her church dress back at the ranch. Now it would have to serve as evening wear. She pinned her hair more carefully than usual, allowing a few curls to frame her face, and dabbed a tiny amount of rose water, her one luxury, behind her ears. Looking in the small mirror above her washstand, Hannah hardly recognized herself. She had lost weight in the past weeks from the physical labor and limited food, and there were shadows beneath her eyes. But there was also a determination in her gaze that hadn't been there before. "It's just dinner," she told her reflection, "nothing more." The walk back to the Silver Palace took 15 minutes. Hannah arrived in the lobby just before 7, her stomach fluttering with nerves. Ryder was already waiting, dressed in clean clothes, not fancy but respectable. A crisp white shirt, dark pants, and a vest. He had shaved and his dark hair was neatly combed. He looked up as she entered, and something in his expression made Hannah glad she had accepted his invitation. "You look lovely," he said simply as she approached. "Thank you," Hannah smiled. "This is very kind of you. It's my pleasure." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The restaurant was the finest in Silverdale, with white tablecloths and real silver. As they were seated, Hannah noticed several glances in their direction. By tomorrow, there would be fresh gossip about Hannah Gardner dining with the Texas cattleman. "I hope you don't mind being seen with me," she said quietly once they were settled. "People talk in a town this size." Ryder's expression was calm. "I've never much cared what others think, have you?" "I didn't used to." Hannah smoothed her napkin in her lap. "But circumstances have made me more aware of it lately. Because of your husband," she nodded. "Edward leaving the way he did, it's made me something of a curiosity, the abandoned wife. I'm sorry." His gray eyes held genuine sympathy. "That must be difficult." "It is. But not as difficult as losing everything and having to start over at 33. Hannah surprised herself with her candor. "I'm sorry, that was too personal." "Not at all. I asked you to dinner because I wanted to know you better, Hannah. Your honesty is refreshing." The waiter appeared then, saving her from having to respond. Ryder ordered for both of them after confirming Hannah's preferences: roast beef for him, chicken for her with vegetables and potatoes, a bottle of wine to share. "Tell me about yourself," Hannah said once they were alone again. "You're from Texas originally, born and raised near San Antonio. My father was a rancher, small operation. When he died, I sold the land and used the money to buy cattle. Started driving herds north about 15 years ago. It sounds like a hard life. It can be. Months on the trail, sleeping under the stars, facing whatever comes: storms, rustlers, river crossings." He smiled slightly. "But there's a freedom to it that I've never found anywhere else." "I understand that. I used to feel that way about our ranch. It was remote, but it was ours." "Or so I thought." Hannah took a sip of her wine. "What about family? Do you have one waiting in Texas?" A shadow crossed his face. "I was married once, a long time ago. She died in childbirth along with our son." "I'm so sorry." Hannah's heart ached for him. It was 20 years ago now. "I've made my peace with it." Ryder changed the subject. "What about you? Did you and your husband have children?" "No, Edward didn't want them. He said they would complicate things." She gave a bitter laugh. "I suppose he was right in a way. It would have been harder for him to walk away from a family. Or perhaps he would have had a reason to stay." Their food arrived, steam rising from the plates. Hannah realized how hungry she was. She had been so nervous about the dinner that she hadn't eaten since morning. "This looks wonderful," she said, genuinely appreciative. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments before Ryder spoke again. "May I ask what you plan to do now? Will you stay in Silverdale?" Hannah considered the question. "I don't have much choice at the moment. The work at the hotel pays enough to survive, and I hope to save something eventually. Perhaps enough to rent a small place of my own where I could take in sewing." "You sew?" "Yes, I made this dress, actually." She smoothed the fabric of her sleeve. "I wanted to work for the dressmaker in town, but she had no positions available." Ryder studied her with those penetrating gray eyes. "You're a resourceful woman, Hannah Gardner." "I've had to become one." As the meal progressed, Hannah found herself relaxing. Ryder was easy to talk to, a good listener who asked thoughtful questions and shared his own experiences without dominating the conversation. By the time dessert arrived, apple pie with cream, she had told him more about her life than she had told anyone in years. "Edward and I married when I was 18, she explained. "He was charming, confident. My parents had just died and I was alone. He offered security, a future. And he betrayed that trust." Hannah nodded. "The gambling started small, a card game with friends, betting on horse races. But it grew. The last few years he would disappear for days, return with either a pocket full of money or excuses about bad luck." She sighed. "I should have seen it coming, I suppose." "Don't blame yourself for his failings," Ryder said firmly. "A man who would abandon his wife after gambling away their home isn't worth your regret." His words warmed her. For the first time since Edward had left, Hannah felt truly seen and understood. After dinner, Ryder insisted on walking her back to her hotel. "I've kept you out late," he said apologetically as they walked through the now quiet streets. "I enjoyed myself," Hannah admitted. "It's been a long time since I've had such pleasant company." When they reached her hotel, Hannah turned to face him. "Thank you for dinner, Ryder. It was very kind of you. Would you allow me to call on you again, perhaps tomorrow evening?" Hannah hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I would like that." His smile transformed his face again, making him look younger, less careworn. "Until tomorrow, then." On impulse, Hannah extended her hand. Ryder took it gently, his larger hand engulfing hers. Instead of shaking it, however, he raised it to his lips and placed a brief, gentle kiss on her knuckles. "Good night, Hannah." She watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from the contact. A warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the evening air. For the first time since Edward's letter had arrived, Hannah felt something other than despair about her future. It wasn't hope, not exactly, but it was something close to it. The next day dragged endlessly. Hannah was back in the laundry, scrubbing sheets until her arms ached, but her mind was elsewhere. She found herself watching the clock, counting the hours until evening. Mrs. Holloway noticed her distraction. "Got your head in the clouds today, Gardner? I'm sorry, I'll focus better." The older woman snorted. "Heard you had dinner with that cattleman, McCoy." News traveled fast in Silverdale. Hannah kept her expression neutral. "Yes, Mr. McCoy kindly invited me to dine with him." Mrs. Holloway studied her for a moment. "Just be careful, men like that move on." "It's in their nature." Hannah returned to her scrubbing. It was only dinner, Mrs. Holloway, but as she worked, Hannah couldn't help wondering what exactly she was doing. Ryder would leave Silverdale soon. Whatever connection they were forming had no future. Was she setting herself up for another heartbreak? By the time she finished work and returned to her hotel to freshen up, Hannah had almost convinced herself to decline Ryder's invitation. It would be the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. But when she saw him waiting in the lobby, tall and straight-backed, his face lighting up as she approached, Hannah's resolve weakened. "I thought perhaps we could walk by the river," Ryder suggested. "If you're not too tired from work," the concern in his voice touched her. "A walk sounds perfect." They strolled through town and across the small wooden bridge to the path that ran alongside the river. The evening was mild, with just enough breeze to rustle the leaves of the cottonwood trees that lined the bank. "I spoke with the bank manager today," Ryder said after they had walked in comfortable silence for a while. "About your ranch." Hannah stopped walking. "My ranch? Why would you do that?" "I was curious about the circumstances. The manager, Perkins, seemed eager to talk about it." "I imagine he was," Hannah said bitterly. "My humiliation has been quite the entertainment for this town." "That's not why I asked." Ryder's voice was gentle but firm. "I wanted to understand what happened, what Edward Gardner did. And what did you learn?" Hannah resumed walking, keeping her eyes on the river. "That your husband took out several loans against the property without your knowledge. That when he couldn't repay them, he signed over the deed to the bank before leaving town." Ryder hesitated. "And that legally there may be a way for you to contest it." Hope flared briefly in Hannah's chest before dying away. "Contest it? How? In Montana territory, a married woman's property rights are limited but not non-existent. If you didn't sign the transfer of deed, if you can prove you weren't aware of the loans." "I had no idea about any of it until I received his letter and then the bank's notice," Hannah said, her mind racing. "But even if I could contest it, I have no money for lawyers, for court fees." "I might be able to help with that." Hannah stopped again, turning to face him fully. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." Ryder met her gaze steadily. "Because what was done to you was wrong, and because I care what happens to you, Hannah." The sincerity in his voice made her heart beat faster, but caution held her back. "I appreciate your concern, Ryder, truly, but I can't accept such help. I've already been dependent on one man who betrayed my trust. I need to find my own way forward." Rather than being offended, Ryder nodded with understanding. "I respect that, but the offer stands if you change your mind." They continued walking, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Ryder told her about Texas, about the ranch he hoped to buy someday when he tired of the trail. Hannah shared memories of her childhood in Missouri before her parents died and she married Edward. As darkness fell, they turned back toward town. When they reached her hotel, Hannah found herself reluctant to end the evening. "Would you care to join me for coffee in the hotel restaurant?" She suggested impulsively. "It's still early," Ryder smiled. "I'd like that." The restaurant was quiet, with only a few patrons lingering over late meals. They found a small table in the corner and ordered coffee. "Tell me more about your plans," Hannah said once their drinks arrived. "You mentioned wanting your own ranch someday." "That's been the dream for years now, a place of my own, cattle, horses, somewhere to put down roots." Ryder's expression grew thoughtful. "The older I get, the more appealing that sounds. And yet you continue driving cattle. It pays well." "I'm saving for the right property, and there's still part of me that craves the open trail, I suppose." He took a sip of his coffee. "What about you? If you could have anything, what would it be?" Hannah considered the question. No one had asked her that in a very long time. "A home," she said finally. "Not necessarily a big one, but somewhere that's truly mine, and purpose. Work that matters, that I'm good at." "The sewing? Yes, I've always loved creating things with my hands, making something beautiful and useful from nothing but cloth and thread." "You should have that chance." "Perhaps someday," Hannah said softly. They talked until the restaurant began closing, sharing hopes and memories, finding unexpected common ground despite their different backgrounds. When they finally parted for the night, Hannah felt lighter than she had in months. The next few days fell into a pattern. Hannah worked at the laundry during the day, and in the evenings, she and Ryder would meet. Sometimes they would dine at the restaurant, other times take walks by the river, or simply sit in the hotel lobby talking for hours. Hannah knew people were talking. She saw the glances, heard the whispers that would stop when she approached. But for the first time in her life, she found she didn't care what others thought. There was something freeing about having already lost everything: her home, her security, her reputation. What more could gossip take from her? A week after their first dinner, Ryder invited Hannah to ride with him to see the cattle herd, which was grazing in a valley about 5 miles from town. "I'd like you to see what I do," he explained, "and I think you could use a day away from the laundry." Hannah accepted eagerly. Mrs. Holloway reluctantly gave her the afternoon off, just this once, mind you, and at midday, Hannah met Ryder at the stables behind the Silver Palace. He had arranged for a gentle mare for her to ride, and they set out under a clear blue October sky. Hannah hadn't ridden properly in years. Edward had discouraged it, saying it wasn't ladylike, and she reveled in the freedom of the open road. "You ride well," Ryder observed as they cantered side by side. "I grew up riding. My father taught me when I was barely old enough to sit a saddle." Hannah felt the wind in her hair and laughed with pure joy. "I'd forgotten how much I love this." Ryder's answering smile was warm. "It suits you, freedom." They reached the valley where the herd was grazing, hundreds of longhorn cattle spread across the grassland. Several cowboys on horseback circled the perimeter, keeping watch. "This is your herd?" Hannah asked, impressed by the size of it. 3,000 head, more or less. "We started with 3,500 in Texas, lost some to river crossings, a few to predators." Ryder's voice held pride. "They'll fetch a good price at the railroad." The cowboys greeted Ryder with respect, tipping their hats to Hannah. She recognized a few from town, including the men who had harassed her that night. They kept their eyes down, clearly embarrassed. "Let me show you the camp," Ryder said, guiding his horse toward a cluster of wagons at the edge of the valley. The trail camp was simple but efficient. A large chuck wagon served as kitchen and supply storage. Bedrolls were arranged in a circle around the fire pit. Everything was neat and organized. "Cookie's the most important man on the drive," Ryder explained, introducing her to a weathered older man who was already preparing the evening meal. "Josiah keeps us fed and doctors everything from snake bites to broken bones." The cook nodded respectfully to Hannah. "Madam, boss has told us about you." "Has he?" Hannah glanced at Ryder, who looked slightly embarrassed. "Said you were a lady worthy of respect," Josiah continued, "and that any man who said otherwise would answer to him." Ryder cleared his throat. "Josiah, don't you have biscuits to make?" The older man grinned. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." They spent the afternoon at the camp. Ryder showed Hannah how they moved the herd, demonstrated rope tricks, and introduced her to his horse, Thunder, a magnificent black stallion with intelligent eyes. "He's beautiful," Hannah said, stroking the horse's velvety nose. "He's been with me for 8 years. Best cow horse I've ever known." Ryder patted the stallion's neck affectionately. "Smarter than most men I've met, too." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they prepared to return to town. Before they left, Josiah insisted on sending them with food biscuits, jerky, and 2 slices of apple pie wrapped in cloth. "You bring her back again, boss," the cook called as they rode away. "Been too long since we had a lady's company." On the ride back, they stopped at a high ridge overlooking the valley. The setting sun painted the landscape in golds and reds, the herd below appearing as dark dots against the golden grass. "It's beautiful," Hannah said, dismounting to stand at the edge of the ridge. Ryder joined her, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him beside her. "Yes, it is." But when Hannah glanced at him, she found he wasn't looking at the view, he was looking at her. Her breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. "Hannah," he said softly, "I'm leaving in 3 days. The railroad cars will be ready and we'll drive the herd to Helena." Though she had known this was coming, the words still struck her like a physical blow. "I understand." "No, I don't think you do." Ryder turned to face her fully. "I don't want to leave, not without knowing." "Knowing what, if there could be something between us, something real?" Hannah's heart pounded. "Ryder, you live in Texas, I'm here, we've known each other barely 2 weeks. I know." He took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "But in those 2 weeks, I've come to care for you more than I thought possible. You're brave and strong and beautiful, Hannah Gardner, and I can't bear the thought of riding away and never seeing you again." "What are you saying?" Hannah hardly dared to hope. "Come with me to Helena and then, wherever you want to go, Texas if you'd like to see it, or we could stay in Montana territory. I have savings enough to buy land to start fresh." Hannah pulled her hands away, overwhelmed. "You're asking me to leave everything?" "To go with you just like that." "What's keeping you here, Hannah?" "A job washing other people's linens. A town that sees you as nothing but a cautionary tale." His words, though blunt, rang with truth. What did Silverdale offer her but hard work and painful memories? "I barely know you," she whispered, though her heart argued otherwise. "Then take the time to know me better. Come to Helena. We'll stay there while the cattle are sold and loaded. If you decide this isn't what you want, I'll ensure you have the means to return to Silverdale or go anywhere else you choose." Ryder's eyes held hers. "But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, Hannah, give us a chance." The sun had slipped lower, casting long shadows across the ridge. In the golden light, Ryder's face was cast in sharp relief, the strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years in the sun, the earnest expression that made him look younger somehow. "I need to think," Hannah said finally. It's a lot to consider." Ryder nodded, disappointment visible in his eyes but respect in his voice. "Of course, you have 3 days." They rode back to town in silence, each lost in thought. When they reached Hannah's hotel, Ryder helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for today," Hannah said quietly. "It was wonderful. Think about what I said." His voice was gentle but urgent. "Please." Hannah nodded and turned to go inside. Before she reached the door, she looked back. Ryder was still there, watching her, his tall figure silhouetted against the twilight sky. That night, Hannah barely slept. Her mind raced with possibilities, fears, hopes. What Ryder was proposing was madness, leaving with a man she had known for mere weeks, traveling to an unknown future. It was reckless, impulsive, and yet, what was waiting for her in Silverdale? Years of washing laundry, living in a rented room, saving pennies that would never amount to enough for the life she wanted. By morning, Hannah was no closer to a decision. She went to work with dark circles under her eyes, earning a concerned look from Mrs. Holloway. "You all right, Gardner?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just tired," Hannah replied, focusing on the sheets she was folding. "That cowboy of yours keeping you up late." There was no malice in the older woman's tone, just curiosity. "He's not my cowboy, Mrs. Holloway. Could have fooled me." "The way he looks at you." Hannah said nothing, but the words stayed with her throughout the day. The way he looks at you. Was it possible that in these few short weeks, Ryder McCoy had developed genuine feelings for her? Or was she simply a convenient distraction, a lonely woman who would be easy to persuade into his bed? But that wasn't fair, and Hannah knew it. Ryder had been nothing but respectful, had never pushed for anything more than conversation and company. And his offer to take her with him but give her the freedom to leave if she chose spoke of sincerity, not manipulation. That evening, Hannah waited for Ryder in the lobby of the Silver Palace as they had arranged. When he arrived, she could see the question in his eyes, though he didn't ask it directly. "Would you like to walk?" he suggested instead. They strolled through town and ended up at the small church at the edge of Main Street. The building was simple but well-maintained, with a small garden beside it that was still blooming despite the advancing autumn. "May we sit?" Hannah asked, gesturing to a bench in the garden. Once they were seated, Hannah took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about your offer." Ryder waited, his expression carefully neutral. "It's not that I don't care for you," Hannah began. "These past weeks have been unexpected, wonderful. You've shown me kindness when I needed it most." "But," Ryder prompted gently when she paused, "but I'm afraid." The admission cost her, but Hannah needed to be honest. "I married Edward when I was 18 and alone. I thought he would be my security, my future. I was wrong. I'm not Edward. I know that, but I'm not the same naive girl I was then, either. I can't simply leap into another man's arms expecting him to solve my problems." Ryder was quiet for a moment, then he reached for her hand, holding it lightly. "Hannah, I don't want to solve your problems. I want to stand beside you while you solve them yourself. There's a difference." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. "What if it doesn't work? What if we reach Helena or Texas and discover we've made a terrible mistake? Then we part ways, no blame on either side. I meant what I said. I'll ensure you have the means to go wherever you choose." "And if it does work, what then?" Ryder's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Then we build something together, a home, a life, whatever we both want." Hannah looked at their joined hands, his much larger than hers, work roughened like her own. "I still have another day to decide." "Yes." "We leave at dawn the day after tomorrow." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "But Hannah, whatever you decide, know this. Meeting you has changed me. Whatever happens, I won't regret that." They parted soon after, Ryder walking her back to her hotel. He didn't kiss her, though Hannah found herself wishing he would. Instead, he tipped his hat and said simply, "Until tomorrow." The next day passed in a blur of work and indecision. By evening, Hannah was no closer to an answer. She paced her small room, weighing options, second-guessing herself. A knock at her door startled her. Opening it, she found the hotel clerk. "Message for you, Mrs. Gardner." He handed her a folded paper. Hannah thanked him and closed the door before opening the note. "Meet me at the church garden at sunset, R.M." Her heart raced as she reread the simple message. Sunset was less than an hour away. Quickly, Hannah changed into her green dress and pinned her hair, her fingers trembling slightly. The church garden was empty when she arrived, the setting sun casting long shadows across the flower beds. Hannah sat on the bench where they had talked the previous evening and waited. Minutes passed. The sun dipped lower. Hannah began to wonder if she had misunderstood the message or if Ryder had changed his mind. Then she heard footsteps on the gravel path. Ryder appeared, looking unusually nervous. He had dressed carefully. She noticed a clean shirt, his best vest, hair neatly combed. "Hannah." He sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Thank you for coming." "Your note sounded important." Ryder nodded. "It is. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About being afraid, about not wanting to depend on a man again." "Yes, you're right to be cautious. After what Edward did, anyone would be." He took a deep breath. "But I want you to know that I don't see you as someone to rescue, Hannah. I see you as an equal, a partner." Hannah's heart beat faster at the word. "A partner?" "Yes." Ryder shifted to face her more directly. "I'm not offering you charity or protection. I'm offering you a choice, a chance to build something new together." "What exactly are you proposing, Ryder?" His gray eyes met hers, steady and sincere. "Marry me, Hannah, not because you need me, but because we could be good together. Because in the short time I've known you, I've come to admire your strength, your intelligence, your courage." Hannah's breath caught. Marriage. "Ryder, we barely know each other." "I know enough. I know you're a woman who faces adversity with grace, who rebuilds when everything is taken from her, who doesn't let the world break her spirit." He took her hands in his. "I know I want to wake up beside you each morning and fall asleep beside you each night. I know I want to build a home with you, work beside you, grow old with you." Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. Marriage never is, but it's real, Hannah. What I feel for you is real. And if I say no, if I'm not ready for this, then I still leave tomorrow, but with the memory of a remarkable woman who changed me." His thumbs brushed over her knuckles. "And maybe someday our paths will cross again." Hannah looked at their joined hands, then at the garden around them, the flowers catching the last golden rays of sunlight. She thought of her life before Edward left, the quiet desperation, the loneliness even within her marriage. She thought of the weeks since, the hard work, the struggle, the uncertainty. And then she thought of the past 2 weeks with Ryder, the conversations, the laughter, the feeling of being truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life. "My husband left me with nothing," she said softly. "Then you'll have everything in me," Ryder replied, his voice deep with emotion. "My heart, my loyalty, my respect, everything I am and everything I have." The words, so simple and yet so profound, broke through Hannah's last defenses. This was not Edward offering security in exchange for her youth and beauty. This was Ryder offering partnership, offering to walk beside her rather than lead her. "Yes," she whispered, surprised at how right the word felt. "Yes, I'll marry you, Ryder McCoy," his face transformed with joy. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Ryder leaned forward. When his lips met hers, Hannah felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the setting sun and everything to do with the man holding her hands as if they were the most precious things he had ever touched. The kiss was gentle, respectful, yet Hannah felt it down to her toes. When they parted, Ryder's eyes were bright with emotion. "We can be married tomorrow morning before we leave," he said. "The preacher here knows me, he'll do it." Hannah nodded, a sense of rightness settling over her. Tomorrow morning. They spent another hour in the garden, planning their immediate future. The cattle would be driven to Helena, loaded on rail cars bound for Chicago. Ryder would settle his business affairs, and then they would decide together where to go next. Texas, perhaps, or somewhere in Montana territory where land was still available for those willing to work it. "I have savings," Ryder explained. "Enough to buy land, build a modest house, get started with a small herd, and your sewing there's always need for a skilled seamstress." "A partnership," Hannah said, testing the word. "Equal partners." Ryder's smile was warm. "Your dreams are as important as mine, Hannah. We'll build our future together." When they finally parted for the night, their last night apart, Hannah realized with a flutter in her stomach Ryder kissed her again, longer this time, his arms encircling her waist. "Until tomorrow, Mrs. McCoy," he murmured against her lips. "I'm not Mrs. McCoy yet," Hannah reminded him with a smile. "You will be." The certainty in his voice made her believe it too. Hannah returned to her hotel in a daze of happiness and nervous anticipation. She packed her few belongings, paid her bill, and arranged for Penny to be brought from the stable to the church in the morning. Sleep was impossible. Hannah lay awake, watching moonlight filter through her window, wondering at the strange path her life had taken. A month ago, she had been Edward Gardner's wife, secure in what she thought was a stable if not particularly happy marriage. Now she was preparing to marry a man she had known for just over 2 weeks, to leave Silverdale behind and start again. It should have terrified her. Instead, Hannah felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Ryder was not Edward. She knew that with a certainty that defied logical explanation. There was a steadiness to him, an honesty that she trusted implicitly. Dawn broke clear and cool. Hannah dressed with care in her blue dress, the same one she had worn the day they first spoke. She pinned her hair simply, with just a few flowers she had picked from the hotel garden tucked into the knot at the nape of her neck. At the appointed time, she made her way to the church. Ryder was waiting outside, dressed in his best clothes, his hat in his hands. Beside him stood Josiah, the cook from the cattle drive, and two of the other cowboys. "You came," Ryder said, relief evident in his voice, as if he had half expected her to change her mind. "I promised I would." Hannah smiled up at him. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. The preacher, a kind older man named Reverend Thomas, spoke of partnership and respect, of building a life together on a foundation of trust and shared purpose. When it came time for the vows, Hannah's voice was steady as she promised to love, honor, and cherish Ryder. His hands were warm around hers as he made the same promises in return. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend said. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. McCoy." Ryder's kiss was tender but held a promise of passion that made Hannah blush. The small group of witnesses applauded, and Josiah wiped suspiciously at his eyes. "The boys wanted to give you something," Ryder said once they stepped outside, "a wedding gift." One of the cowboys stepped forward, holding a small wooden box. "It ain't much, Madam Mrs. McCoy, but we all chipped in." Hannah opened the box to find a beautiful silver brooch in the shape of a rose. "It's lovely, thank you all." "Boss has been happier these past weeks than we've seen him in years," the cowboy said, shifting awkwardly. "We figured you was the reason." Touched by the gesture, Hannah pinned the brooch to her dress immediately. Ryder watched with a smile that made her heart race. "We should get moving," he said after a moment. "Long journey ahead." The cattle drive was already in motion, the herd being guided toward the road that would take them north to Helena. Ryder had arranged for Hannah's few possessions to be loaded onto one of the supply wagons, and Penny was saddled and waiting. As they prepared to ride out, Hannah cast one last look at Silverdale. The town had been her home for only a month, yet leaving it felt significant. It was where she had hit bottom, where she had begun to rebuild, and where she had found Ryder. "Any regrets?" Ryder asked softly. Noticing her hesitation, Hannah shook her head. "No, no regrets." They rode together at the head of the drive, side by side. The Montana landscape stretched before them, vast and beautiful under the October sky. Hannah felt a sense of freedom she had never known before, not just the freedom of the open road, but the freedom to choose her own path, with a partner who valued her as an equal. The journey to Helena took 5 days. Hannah quickly adapted to trail life, rising before dawn, riding all day, sleeping under the stars beside Ryder at night. The cowboys treated her with a mixture of respect and protective admiration, especially after she demonstrated her skill with a needle by mending torn shirts and patching worn gear in the evenings. Josiah, the cook, took a particular liking to her. "Boss got himself a good one," he told Ryder one evening as Hannah helped serve the evening meal. "Smart, hardworking, and easy on the eyes to boot." "I'm a fortunate man," Ryder agreed, his gaze following Hannah with an appreciation that made her cheeks warm. Each night, as they lay together in their bedroll, Hannah learned more about the man she had married. Ryder told her about his childhood in Texas, about the wife and child he had lost, about his dreams for the future. In turn, she shared her own hopes and fears, her memories of happier times before Edward, her desire to build something that was truly hers. Their physical relationship developed gradually. Ryder was patient, never pushing, letting Hannah set the pace. Their first night together as husband and wife had been chased a simple sharing of warmth and closeness as they lay side by side under the vast Montana sky. But as the days passed, their embraces grew more intimate, their kisses more urgent. By the time they reached Helena, Hannah had discovered a passion within herself she hadn't known existed, a desire for her husband that both surprised and delighted her. Ryder's touch was gentle yet sure, his experience balanced by his respect for her boundaries. In his arms, Hannah found a pleasure and connection she had never experienced with Edward. Helena was larger and more developed than Silverdale, a proper city with brick buildings, paved streets, and amenities that spoke of established wealth. The cattle were delivered to the stockyards by the railroad, where they would be loaded onto trains bound for Chicago. While the herd was being processed, Ryder secured rooms at one of the city's better hotels, not the most luxurious, but comfortable and clean. For the first time in weeks, Hannah had access to a proper bath, clean sheets, and privacy with her new husband. "What do you think of Helena?" Ryder asked as they walked through the city the next day, his arm protectively around her waist. "It's impressive," Hannah admitted. "Bigger than I expected. We could stay if you like. There's good land nearby, not too far from civilization, but with enough space to build something of our own." Hannah considered it. "Is that what you want, to settle here?" Ryder shrugged. "I want what will make us both happy. Texas has good land too, and it's what I know best. But the winters are milder, which might be an advantage for starting out." "Let's decide after your business is concluded," Hannah suggested. "We have time to consider our options." They spent a week in Helena while Ryder completed the sale of the cattle and settled accounts with his employers and the Cowboys. The men would return to Texas by train, while Ryder and Hannah would chart their own course. On their last evening in the city, after a celebratory dinner with the trail crew, Ryder presented Hannah with an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find a substantial amount of money. "Your share of the cattle sale," Ryder said simply, "as my wife and partner." Hannah stared at the money more than she had ever had at her disposal. "Ryder, this is too much. You earned this, not me. We're partners, remember? Equal partners." He covered her hand with his. "Besides, I want you to have your own money, something that's yours alone. After what Edward did, I want you to always have security, independence." Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes. It wasn't just the money, it was the understanding behind the gesture, the recognition of her fears and the respect for her autonomy. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning across the table to kiss him softly. That night, as they lay together in their hotel room, decisions made and future plans taking shape, Hannah traced the contours of Ryder's face in the moonlight. "I never thought I could be this happy again," she confessed. "After Edward left, I thought that was it for me, a life of struggle and loneliness." Ryder captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Your husband left you with nothing, but Hannah, you never had nothing. You had courage, strength, intelligence. All the things that made me fall in love with you. And now," she asked, her voice soft in the darkness, "now you have everything in me," Ryder promised, "and I have everything in you." As spring arrived in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, Hannah stood on the porch of the home she and Ryder had built together. The house wasn't large, 4 rooms with a wraparound porch, but it was solid and comfortable, with large windows that let in the Montana sunshine. They had decided to stay in Montana territory after all, purchasing a parcel of land about 20 miles from Helena. Close enough to town for supplies and society when they wanted it, but far enough for the privacy and independence they both valued. Ryder had used his savings to buy a starter herd of cattle and several good horses. Hannah had set up a small dressmaking business, serving clients from Helena who were willing to make the journey for her skilled work. Between the ranch and her sewing, they were building a good life together. The past 6 months had not been without challenges. Building a home and starting a ranch from scratch was hard work. There had been arguments, misunderstandings, moments of doubt, but they had weathered each storm together as partners, growing stronger with each challenge overcome. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. Hannah leaned back against his solid chest. "How much has changed in a year? Last spring, I thought I knew what my life would be. Edward and the ranch, security if not great happiness. Regrets?" His voice held no insecurity, just honest curiosity. Hannah turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. The winter had been kind to them. Ryder's skin was tanned from working outdoors, his gray eyes clear and bright. "Not one," she said truthfully. "Everything that happened, even the painful parts, led me here. To you, to us." Ryder's smile was tender as he placed a hand on her abdomen, which had just begun to show the first signs of the child they were expecting in the fall. "To our family." Hannah covered his hand with her own. The baby had been a surprise, a joyful one. After 15 years of marriage to Edward with no children, Hannah had assumed she couldn't conceive. But 5 months into her marriage to Ryder, she had missed her monthly courses, and a visit to the doctor in Helena had confirmed what she had begun to suspect. "I'm scared sometimes," she admitted. "About becoming a mother, about whether I'll know what to do." "We'll figure it out together," Ryder promised. "Like everything else." Hannah nodded, leaning into his embrace. Together. It was still a novel concept, sometimes having a true partner, someone who stood beside her rather than above her or behind her. From inside the house came the sound of someone knocking on the door. Hannah pulled away reluctantly. That must be Mrs. Collins for her fitting. Ryder kissed her quickly. "I'll be in the barn if you need me." As Hannah went to greet her client, she paused in the doorway to watch Ryder stride toward the barn, his tall figure silhouetted against the blue Montana sky. Her husband, her partner, the father of the child growing beneath her heart. A year ago, Edward Gardner had left her with nothing but betrayal and shattered dreams. But in losing everything, Hannah had found the strength to build something new, something true and lasting, founded on respect and love rather than dependency and obligation. Ryder had been right that night by the river. She had never truly had nothing. She had always had herself, her courage, her resilience, her capacity to love, and now she had everything in him just as he had promised, and he had everything in her. Together, they were building a life neither of them could have imagined when they first met that autumn evening in Silverdale. A life of partnership, purpose, and love that grew stronger with each passing day, and for Hannah Gardner McCoy, that was everything.